Well, hello, 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 and welcome to another Write Club, where there are no rules to Write Club, except there is one rule to Write Club. We don't talk about Write Club, but we do share. Share everything that we've written. That's the first rule of Write Club. I say there are no rules with an R, but there are rules with a W. Write Club has rules, and that is that we share our work. We share what it is that we are working from, because the biggest thing that we have as authors, by and large, is the fear of being seen, the fear of being heard, the fears that come up when we're actually sharing our voices, sharing what we've written, sharing our viewpoints. They might be contradictory to our family, to our society, to the world at large, but nothing great has ever been done without meeting resistance. And the biggest resistance is the internal resistance. We actually care a lot more about what the world thinks than the world is actually thinking about our writing. In fact, your writing didn't come to you by chance. The world is filled with all these ideas floating around in the ethers, and it is looking for a home that is ready to speak that idea, to bring that idea forward. So it's just about us looking up and going, oh, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. Sometimes we'll pull something in and write it, and after we've written it, we'll look at it and we'll say, that one wasn't for me. And we'll put it back out. In fact, today we're actually going to be influenced, we're going to be inspired by Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. And she actually talks about in this book a story that she created a pen pal relationship with one of her favorite authors, a novelist. And in being traditionalists and in being writers, they wouldn't email each other or text each other or Facebook message each other. They would write each other's letters, pen pals in the true sense of the word. And one day, it was actually Ann Patchett, the author, one day, Elizabeth Gilbert got this idea, brought it down, wrote out this first draft, this big idea, dumped the whole thing on paper, wrote it out, and was so inspired by it, she sent it off to her friend and mentor, Ann Patchett. Sent it off in the mailbox and awaited the response. Well, just a few days later, she received a letter coming in from Ann Patchett, who surprisingly could not have received that letter in time and then posted a letter back. So when Elizabeth Gilbert opened it, she read it, and it was Ann Patchett having written Elizabeth Gilbert a letter that described the exact same novel, the exact same idea, a woman who lived in the Amazon, who was kidnapped and defeated by these guerrilla soldiers. And incredibly, it had very, very few differences and many similarities. And it couldn't have been that they were both just influenced by the same thing. The idea was hanging around in the ether, waiting for someone to pick it up. And both women were ready to pick it up, to write it. They plucked it out. Now, when they both realized that they were both had this idea for the same novel, they decided that Elizabeth Gilbert decided that the best person to write it was not herself. It was, in fact, Ann Patchett, who had this experience having lived in the Amazon jungle and had this experience of an older woman and had the experience that could tell this story. And it actually became one of Ann Patchett's best-selling novels. But the point is that as authors, there are ideas floating around in the ether, waiting for the right person to pick them up. And the biggest reason we don't is fear. And I know we all aspire to be brave and courageous and think that we're writing from the heart and bearing our souls and writing the depth of our experience. But the truth of it is, we may have some fault lines, something in our rear view mirror. You know, they say when you look in the rear view mirror, there's a little sign on it that says objects in the mirror are closer than they appear. In our own rear view mirror, objects in the mirror are further away than they appear, are scarier than they appear, are intangible, less tangible than they appear. We have blind spots. We can't see some things because of fear around what it is that we want to express. And that's just coming up for us to look at. So, inspired by Big Magic, I'm actually going to ask you to do a little exercise before we get into our free writing meditation. So she talks about, let's talk about courage now. If you already have the courage to bring forth the jewels that are hidden within you, terrific. You're probably already doing interesting things with your life. And you don't need this book. Rock on. And I will add that if you are here for this course, if you have all the most interesting things and are able to express them, you probably don't need this course. And so it's my honor and pleasure that you're here spending time with us. But if you're ready to do the work, then let's rock on with that. If you have the courage, let's try to get some, because creative living is a path for the brave. We all know this, and we all know that when courage dies, creativity dies with it. We all know that fear is a desolate boneyard where our dreams go to desiccate in the hot sun. This is common knowledge. Sometimes we just don't know what to do about it. Let me list for you some of the many ways in which you might be afraid to live a more creative life. Now, here's where I'm going to paraphrase, because what I'd like for you to do, I'm going to change this from the you. I'd like you to write it as I am afraid and finish the sentence. Or just put at the top of your page, I am afraid, and then you can just put the topics as we go. If the topic has doesn't trigger any fear response in you, don't write that one. We don't want to put fears where there are none. But if it has even the slightest twinge or has ever, write it. Afterwards, we're going to come back and actually assess which one of those fears is stopping you from the writing process. So, I'm afraid I have no talent. I'm afraid I'll be rejected or criticized or ridiculed or misunderstood, or worst of all, ignored. I am afraid that there is no market for what I'm writing. And therefore, no point pursuing it. I'm afraid somebody else already did it and that they did it better. I am afraid everybody already did it and they did it better. I am afraid that if I put my work out there, people will steal my ideas. So it's so much safer to keep them hidden in the dark forever. I am afraid I won't be taken seriously. I'll be asked for credibility, background, to prove myself. I'm afraid that my work isn't politically or emotionally or artistically important enough to change anyone's life. I'm going to add to this one. I'm afraid my work is politically, emotionally, or artistically too radical to be accepted. I am afraid that my dreams are embarrassing. I'm afraid that one day I'll look back on my writing or my creative endeavors and see it as a big, giant waste of time, effort, or money. I'm afraid I don't have the right kind of discipline. I'm afraid I never finish anything that I start. I'm afraid I don't have the kind of right workspace or the right financial freedom or empty hours in which to focus on invention or exploration or creativity. That could be summed up by saying, I'm afraid I don't have the right container. I'm afraid I don't have the right kind of education or training or degree. I'm afraid I'm too fat. And she writes here, I don't know what this has to do with creativity, but it seems just a universally accepted thing that people are afraid of being too fat. And any anxiety is going to keep you from creativity. So being afraid you're too fat, if that resonates, I'll 100% agree. Let's take that a step further. I'm afraid that sitting down and writing as a practice will make me become too fat. Because I could be doing a whole bunch of other activities. And that this writing thing will take too long of sitting down on my butt. I'm afraid of being exposed as a hack or a fool or a narcissist. Or if there are any other descriptors that fit for you, exposed as a bad mom, a bad wife, immoral, any exposed as, if you get famous as an author? Are you afraid that somebody will bring up a picture of you when you were 16 years old smoking a joint? I'm afraid of upsetting my family with what I may reveal. I'm afraid of what my peers and colleagues will say if I express my personal truth out loud. You can add neighbors, coworkers. I'm afraid that if I allow my darkness to come out, I will unleash my demons. And I really don't want to encounter my innermost demons. I'm afraid that my creativity or my best work or my artistic side is behind me. It's another way of saying I'm afraid I'm too old. And with that, as a corollary to that, I'm afraid my best work was never that great to begin with. And I'm afraid that I've neglected the creativity so long that now I can't get it back. Another way of saying I've missed my calling. I'm afraid I'm too old to start now or to start over. On the other hand, I'm afraid I'm too young to start. I don't have enough wisdom yet. I'm afraid because I don't want to test my luck. What if this brings bad luck? Converse to that, I'm afraid because I always have bad luck. Nothing ever goes my way. And here's the last couple. I'm afraid I'll be a one-hit wonder, or I'm afraid I'll be a no-hit wonder. Now look over that list just for a couple of minutes in this exercise. We're going to go into a free writing meditation in just a few moments to really ingrain this truth in. But there are a lot of options here. Take a few minutes, read through your list, and underline 3 that are the top fears. And even think, are there things that maybe you can dive deeper and give different words just by establishing which ones are your top 3? What do they really mean? What's underlying? Just take a couple minutes. And once you have a few of those underlined, just 3, we're going to do another exercise. For each of those 3, I want you to think of one person in this world. They may be someone you know, or someone who's in the outer world who has proven those things wrong, those fears wrong. So for instance, if you have a fear of being too old, you may think of Georgia O'Keeffe. Or if you have a fear of being a one-hit wonder, you might think of J.K. Rowling. Or if you have a fear of being a no-hit wonder, you might think of Paulo Coelho. Because the fear is like that rear view mirror on the car. It will make things seem bigger than they appear. And it's those fears, what you've just underlined, that are the ones that are blocking you from writing those 1667 words a day. Recognize when you sit down what your internal world is telling you in your blind spot of why you're not writing every day. And also recognize that those fears are going to come up. We're not getting rid of them. The fear is there. The fear is there. Trying to fight the fear is, in fact, a resistance in itself. Fighting the fear is a resistance, because when you're in a state of resistance to anything, you're in a resistance to yourself. So now we're going to embrace the fear. And we're going to go into a free writing meditation inspired by Elizabeth Gilbert and an exercise that she does, and it's called the road trip. And I'm going to turn off my camera so that you're not distracted. And you're going to do the exercise, but I'll just give you a little bit of a preempt before I have you writing. And as always, for our free writing meditation or our free writing session, there are no rules. Allow your writing to come out however it will. Get a pen and your notebook handy, put the date and the intention at the top of the page, and we begin. So she says, here's how I've learned to deal with my fear. I made a decision a long time ago that if I want creativity in my life, and I do, then I have to make space for fear too. Plenty of space. I decided that I would need to build an expansive enough interior life that my fear and my creativity could peacefully coexist, since it appeared that they would always be together. In fact, it seems to me that my fear and my creativity are basically conjoined twins, as evidenced by the fact that creativity cannot take a single step forward without fear marching right alongside it. I want you to hear that. Where fear comes up, that's where your creativity is. Fear and creativity shared a womb. They were born at the same time and they still share vital organs. This is why we have to be careful now of how we handle fear, because I've noticed that when people try to kill off their fear, they often end up inadvertently murdering their creativity in the process. Just remember, when you're fighting against something, you're not fighting for anything. She goes on to say, so I don't try to kill off my fear. I don't go to war against it. Instead, I make all the space for it. Heaps of space. Every single day, I'm making space for fear right this moment. I allow my fear to live and breathe and stretch out its legs comfortably. It seems to me that the less I fight my fear, the less it fights back. If I can relax, fear relaxes too. In fact, I cordially invite you, or fear, to come along with me everywhere I go. I even have a welcoming speech prepared for fear, which I deliver right before embarking upon any new project or big adventure. And it goes a little something like this. And for you here in Write Club, as I read this for you, I'd like you to listen to the words, riffing, writing your own words of this along as you go. And then I'll give you a few moments. Dearest fear, creativity and I are going on a road trip together. I'm giving you space so that you're not just writing this word for word. I want you to really feel what you're writing. Dearest fear, and then think of the fear that you underlined and write that down. Dearest fear of growing old, of not being creative, of being too fat, whatever it is for you. And then go on to tell it, where are you and creativity going? Tell fear, I understand you'll be joining us because you always do. Fear, I acknowledge that you believe you have an important job to do in my life and that you take your job seriously. Now write fear. What has fear protected you from? And how does fear show up in you? Is it panic, anxiety, fidgeting, distraction, smoking, drinking, yelling, crying? How does it fear come up in you? And now tell it. Fear, you induce complete, and whatever it was that you wrote, panic, anxiety, distraction, you do that really well. Fear, you are superb at your job. And give it permission. Fear, by all means, keep doing your job. Now, right. But I will also be doing my job on this trip. And what is your job to do on this trip of creativity? Whatever fear elicits in you, what is the opposite of that? Write that. Is it focus? Is it discipline? Is it staying calm? Is it inviting in a safe space for creativity? And creativity will be doing its job for me. What does creativity do for you? Stimulate, inspire, keep you in flow? How does creativity show up for you? Give fear a name. If fear was in the car on this road trip, what would it be called? And now give creativity a name. If creativity were in this car on this road trip, what would it be called? Now call your fear by whatever you've called, whatever name you've given it, and say, tell it, there's plenty of room in this vehicle for all of us. Make yourself at home, but understand this. Creativity, and name whatever it is that creativity, that you gave the name of creativity. Creativity and I are the only ones who are making any decisions along the way from this point on. fear and call it by its name. I respect that you will always give your suggestions, but they will never be followed. You are sitting in the back seat of this ride. Creativity and I are in the front seat. I'm the driver, and creativity is the navigator. And also gets to choose what's on the radio. And creativity can only choose a channel that we get the frequency of. We cannot get the channel that we're not in range of. So everything we hear is specifically for us. There may be static along the way, but then creativity will change the channel. Now write to fear in your own words how comfortable this ride is going to be. How you promise fear that it's along for the ride, because it has to be. But that everything inside this vehicle is controlled by you. Now, in your own words, tell fear what the destination is that you're going to. And what you'll see and feel and be when you arrive there. And as you're just finishing up for a few more moments, you can continue writing while I'll just share with you a poem from my good friend Jacob Nordby from Blessed Are the Weird. Hello, says life. Remember me? We started out together here when you were just a bundle of amazement. Remember how you saw the world with nothing but wonder? We were such rowdy playmates then. We painted on the sky with clouds and made magic out of clothespins and peanut butter. Remember, can you, how I became stained and heavy with trouble? Not safe now. So much no. They dressed me in painful clothes and made you wear them too. You don't recognize me, do you? But I've never abandoned you or lost my wild, happy desire to show you, play with you, kiss you, hide and seek down twisty paths, and always discover more. Want to run away with me again? Shall we elope without ever leaving? Because that's possible, you know. I've never been anywhere but here, waiting for you to remember.